tonight. We are excited to have all of you guys here. My name is Cabot Phillips, and I am the editor-in-chief of campusreform.org. We are a project of the Leadership Institute. We're an online publication, and we cover liberal bias and abuse on college campuses. So hopefully you guys have heard of us. If you haven't, go check out campusreform.org. We are covering all the craziness that goes on college campuses. So really excited you're here to join us tonight as we talk with Konni Burton about conservative media, getting your start. It's going to be a great conversation. Have to make a few quick announcements. First off, next week we have another exciting event with Ambassador Nikki Haley. So if you guys are on the call tonight, you like what you hear, you can join us again next week, April 22nd at 8 p.m. Get a chance to ask a question of Ambassador Haley, have a conversation with her about the conservative movement, the future of it, where it's going, all that good stuff. Going to be a wonderful time. Also want to make sure you guys know that tonight we will be giving away a $25 Uber Eats gift card, which wouldn't have been that appealing to me like 2 months ago, but I have Uber Eats every single meal for the past month now, and I'm not embarrassed about it at all. And so hopefully you guys are doing the same thing. So we will be giving that away to a random person on the call. Fingers crossed that it's me, but it probably won't be. So stay tuned. We'll be giving that away at the very end of the call. So make sure that you guys are on for that. Also, if you guys have any interest in, after this call, saying, well, I want to get started in conservative media, where do I go? Obviously go to the Texan as well as campusreform.org. What kind of editor-in-chief would I be if I didn't make my own little plug there? So we have a campus correspondent program where students are able to get their start in media. We put students on TV, we give them writing experience, we have them work with our editors just to make you guys the best possible future reporters and conservative media personalities as possible. So come to our website at campusreform.org. We'll make sure to help you guys out there. And finally, I want to get you guys to our speaker tonight. That's Konni Burton. So Konni is the founder and CEO of The Texan, which is a great news outlet down in Texas. It's focused on stories that matter most to Texans and their pocketbook, which we all find very important. Previously, she was a grassroots activist who worked on numerous campaigns at the state, local, and federal level. Konni went on to run for office herself when she was elected in 2014 to serve Tarrant County's Senate District 10 in Austin, which is kind of the lion's den down there in Texas, but she did us proud. Her experience as a grassroots activist and elected official and taxpayer, just like us, gives her a really unique insight. So we're excited to have her on tonight to tell you guys about her experience in politics and more importantly, starting the Texan and what that entailed. And she's got some great advice for all of us. So Konni, thank you so much for joining us. At that, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And then we will have some questions. So real quick, one more thing to throw in before I get to Konni. If you guys have questions for her, I know you guys are going to pick her brain. There's a Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. During the call, if something comes up, feel free to start typing your questions in. She's going to talk for a few minutes, give a little presentation, kind of share some of her knowledge, and then we're going to get to those questions. So no need to wait till the end. Go ahead and ask those questions throughout. Just give your name, the university you're with, and any student group you're affiliated with, and we'll get to all those questions. So don't forget, type those questions in the Q&A feature. We will get to as many of those as possible at the end. And now I will hand it over to Konni. Konni, thank you.
Hey, Cabot, how are you? Or maybe I shouldn't ask you. I guess you're going away now. Sorry about that. Hey, everybody, thanks so much. I appreciate, Cabot, y'all having me on tonight. It's great to be here with you. Let me give you a little bit. I wished that I was going to be able to show you all some slides as I was speaking, but I'm afraid I'm not as tech savvy as I hoped I could be. So I'm not going to be able to show you the slides that I wanted to. So I'm just going to talk to you a few minutes and then hopefully we'll just kind of go back and forth with Cabot and all the questions that you may have. But as he mentioned, just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I was a grassroots activist. I got very involved in politics really during George W.'s second term. I got very frustrated. I've been a Republican all my life, a conservative all my life, and yet we had a president who was growing government, bailing out private industry, expanding Medicaid Part D. Anyway, it was a lot of things that I was very frustrated with. And so I got actively involved and decided, we're going to need to get conservatives elected. And so I did that, working to get those conservatives that I believed in elected to not only the federal level, but the state level as well. And thought that's what I was going to do. I loved it. I loved being directly involved like that. And then the opportunity came up. Wendy Davis, some of y'all may have heard of her, was actually my state senator. And just to kind of correct Cabot a little bit, I'm actually, this district that I represented is actually in the North Texas area, Fort Worth and surrounding areas, is Senate District 10. And so Wendy Davis was representing us at the time, who is a very liberal Democrat. And I was very frustrated with that. And after searching for some time to find somebody to run against her and couldn't, decided that I needed to be the one to run. I got into the race. She got out to run for governor, and she lost badly to Governor Abbott. I went on to win that race. And so I was a senator, state senator, for 4 years. And then this last election cycle, some of y'all may have heard of a very obscure congressman named Beto O'Rourke, who all of a sudden came out of nowhere to run against Ted Cruz, of course, for Texas State Senate and not State Senate, excuse me, for the federal level. And it was a really bad election cycle for Texas. The 2018 election cycle was because of that. We didn't have a Democrat wave, but we decidedly had a Beto wave. And it was bad on down ballot races here in Texas. I was a victim of that, as well as many other Republican elected officials throughout Texas. And one of the reasons for that is the liberal media here in our state certainly elevated Beto to a level that was unbelievable. You know, he certainly ran a very strong race, a very energetic race, and dropped $80 million on Texas. But I always say that, I venture to say that he could not have even gotten that $80,000 that he spent in Texas had it not been for the liberal media that elevated him to the levels that, you know, got him national attention. So the media, to me, I've seen it from a grassroots activist level. I've seen it from an elected official perspective. And, you know, all of us have seen it all our lives, and it's only gotten worse over time. And so when that election cycle happened and we lost our race, we decided to do something about it. My husband and I have always been very frustrated with the media, as I know many of you are that are watching tonight. And we decided that if nobody else is going to step up and do what needs to be done here in Texas, that we were going to do it. And that's what got us to start the Texan. And it is the Texan.news is our media organization, and it is a statewide political news organization. And it is based in Austin. And that's probably, Cabot, why you mentioned Austin earlier, is the Texan is based there. That's where our office is. We've got staff writers there, as well as contract writers in other parts of the state as well. But I want to tell you really quickly before we get back and kind of answer your questions and talk back and forth, the difference between the Texan and a lot of other right of center media organizations. We have a lot of right of center opinion. We have a lot of right of center advocacy news organizations out there, which is all good, and we love them and we need them. We need all of us working together to expose the media for what they are. But what we decided to do is go head to head with legacy media outlets. And when I say legacy media outlets, what I mean is the newspapers, the old newspapers, which of course have all gradually gone online, like ours is. Obviously, we're only online. But you know, for instance, in Texas, the Dallas Morning News, the Houston Chronicle, the Austin American Statesman, all of those papers that are the legacy media outlets that, even though we all grumble and groan about them, they have a lot of sway, and they have a lot of, you know, people read them, and they are really all they are these days is just they push narratives, and they push the narrative, of course, for the left and not the right. And so what we wanted to do is go head to head with those guys. So we're not an advocacy organization. We don't report, we don't use language that is something that you might see in an advocacy type of organization. In other words, we do straight reporting, but from a right of center perspective. And what I mean by that is the types of stories that are important to us. They don't even get, written about by so many of these major media networks. So the types of stories that we cover, and then from the perspective that we cover it from, and not only that, the language that we use. I really noticed this now that we're in this field, not that we didn't notice it before, but I really notice it more than ever, is, of course, the left of center media, they take the left's talking points and it becomes mainstream in their articles and how they say things. For instance, abortion is abortion, and yet the left of center media calls it reproductive health care, right? That's how it's used in the articles that they write. Those of us that may be very concerned about border security, the stories that the left of center media writes about is the victimization of those who are coming over illegally, rather than say, the safety and security of Texans, or rule of law, or, the fact that there's, drug and drug cartels and those kinds of issues that are involved in the border, right? So it's again, it's not only the type of language that we use, but it's how we portray it. Another thing, excuse me, really quickly, since I don't have my notes here, I kind of forget sometimes, but the other thing about the border is, they'll report on, for instance, one outlet here in Texas reported non-stop about kids in cages under President Trump. I mean, it was all the time, ad nauseum. But to look back, you didn't see those types of articles when Obama was in office, right? So, what we're doing again is we're reporting the news, we're reporting it from the perspective that we see things, the issues that are important to us, and we use the language that everyday Texans use, not just left of center Texans. And so that's kind of how we're different from a lot of other media outlets that are out there. And so I just kind of wanted to give y'all a little bit of a background on who we are. We are very Texas focused. In other words, we are only Texas focused, excuse me. We talk about politics but it's from, the local, state, and federal level, but it has to affect Texans on an everyday basis. So that's who we are. So Cabot, if you want to come back on and we can kind of go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Going to get to a few questions here. Got a few people that are going to be videoing in, and then have a few questions from people here that have typed in. So first off is Chris Maldonado from the University of Texas at El Paso, a fellow Texan. Asking simply, touched on a little bit, but asking simply for you to expand on what inspired you to get involved in politics.
Well, like I mentioned, I was really a Republican, always been a Republican. And, I think those of us that are conservative and Republicans, we go on about our daily lives. We elect our elected official and we hope and we think they're doing sorry about that. We think they're doing, what we've elected them to do. And it wasn't until, again, it was really George W.'s second term when I looked up and it's like, what are we doing? We have, every branch of government, and yet we're expanding the scope and size of the federal government. So it was really at the federal level that got me angry, and to the level that I wanted to do something about it. But I tell you what, it is, to do something about the federal level is so much harder, right? I mean, it really takes you really need to get active at the local and state level. That's where you can really, really have much more of an impact, and should have much more of an impact. Really, the federal government shouldn't have as much to do as they're doing right now, right? And so it was the federal level that got me angry enough to get involved, but I soon learned that really you need to be paying attention to, you know, the things that aren't as sexy, certainly the school board, the city council, the county level politics, the state level. Those are the things that you really need to get actively involved in, because they really have more to do with your day-to-day lives and your day-to-day pocketbook. So that's what's really got me involved. And I think once you get involved in politics, you're kind of, you know, you're always involved. It kind of gets you, and you realize how much of an impact it makes on your everyday lives, and how much of an impact you can make. And so you just keep doing it, even though you want to bang your head against the wall half the time doing it as well.
I always tell people, if your only interaction with politics and voting is just voting for the governor or voting for the president, then you're missing out, because those offices oftentimes impact you a whole lot less than your local officials. So that's where I think people forget.
That's right.
In politics, local, all politics is local, and that's what
exactly correct.
So exactly. I couldn't agree more with you there. I think that's really important for everyone to hear. So next question is someone videoing in, another fellow Texan, Skyler Wachsmann from Texas Tech. Skyler, go ahead and make sure you unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
Hey Connie, thanks for coming on here. My question, so I think the Texans started about a year ago, a little bit over a year?
Yeah.
So my question is, what impact has the Texan made in the media in its short existence?
Right. Thank you for that. One of the things that I did not expect, and what has happened, is that very thing. We've had an impact on other media outlets, and it's not really what I expected, and it's so grateful. So I'll give you a little bit of a background on this particular story. So Congressman Chip Roy, which I believe was on last month on this same series that y'all are doing, he had a town hall in San Antonio. So of course he's had one session. He just got elected. The former congressman retired. So he's finishing up his 2-year term, and of course running again. Anyway, he was back in his home district having a town hall. And we had a reporter there, of course, because one of the races, his race is going to be a very newsworthy race coming up again. And so we were there to see what he had to say, and we're, you know, preparing all these articles and everything. And so he started out the town hall, but there were hecklers there. So he was up on a stage. It was a very full crowd. There were hecklers there that absolutely would not let him get started. He would try to start. He wanted to ask, you know, get people to ask questions and answer them. And these hecklers just kept screaming and yelling. And he was like, can I please? I mean, it was just this back and forth for a good 20 minutes. They would not let him speak. And finally, one of them said something to the effect of, y'all are all just white nationalists or something like that, you know, and at that point in time, Congressman Roy had enough, because he couldn't do his town hall. And so he said, okay. And he handed off the microphone, and he got down off the stage, and he just told everybody, we're just going to have to do it this way, because these people aren't allowing me to talk. They're not allowing you to do, you know, ask me your questions. So of course, then the hecklers left, right? They don't really want to be heard. They don't really want to ask the questions. They just wanted to heckle. And so they left. And then Congressman Roy got back up on stage and said, okay, they're gone. Let's get this let's start over. And so he, you know, the participants there were able to ask the questions, and he was able to answer them. And that's not to say that it still wasn't a tense town hall, because everybody's at your town hall. It's not just the people that agree with you, right? And so it was a pretty, tense back and forth at times, but it was very respectful. Okay. So our reporter who was there, of course, saw all this. He was taping it. Then he wrote an article, a very, again, factually written article. I think it was titled something like Congressman Roy's Townhall starts off rowdy, ends up respectable or something like that. I don't know exactly. You can look it up on our website, but and then just told the whole story point by point. Well, one of the local Austin media outlets tweeted out after, I don't know if it was that night or the next day, but tweeted out, this is what their tweet said, or their headline was, Congressman Roy walks out of Town Hall, right? Which is a very different, right? That's not what happened. And so Congressman Roy's staff, being very frustrated with that, kind of started going back and forth with them on Twitter and said, this isn't what happened. He didn't walk out of the town hall. And our reporter, who is not, again, they're not carrying anybody's water at all. We just factually report. We all say we're right of center, but we factually report in our stories. But our reporter said, respectfully, this is not how it went down. I was there, I've got the video or the audio or whatever. Anyway, because of that, that Austin media outlet took down their tweet, which is pretty amazing and not something that I had ever expected before. But you see the difference. Had we not been there, had we not been out there to say this is not what happened, that narrative that they wanted to push, that Congressman Roy walked out of Town Hall, would still be out there. And listen, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, that's just the fact, I don't know, I don't want to say lie, but that's what it was, right? I mean, these inaccurate portrayals are so frustrating. If we want to argue, let's argue over real facts, not, have these strawman arguments that we constantly have to. So anyway, we've had a couple of situations like that just because we were there. And we had, hey, that's not correct. We had other media outlets change things. And that's a big deal because we're not at the level, the size and scope of a lot of these media outlets, but just the fact that we're there is causing that to happen. So that's been very pleasing.
That's the ultimate validation of your reporting when you can get other people to have to retract something. So
exactly, isn't it? I mean, that was very exciting to us.
That's a great story. And so I want to get to another question here. This one was from Jake Pullman at the University of Washington in Seattle. And simply, are you running into any problems with big tech censorship of your conservative news articles? Big thing in the news right now. Have you guys experienced that at all?
We have not experienced that. And do you think he means like on the social media outlets, do you think particularly?
Yes, I imagine talking about, the shadow banning or feeling like your stuff's maybe not getting the traction that other outlets are.
Right. I have not, our IT guy, our tech guy, marketing guy that handles all that has not given me any indication of anything like that. I know, everything's harder right now with, Facebook with the advertising and all of that, garbage. Everything has become harder because of because of politics itself. But we really haven't seen any of that, fortunately. So I'm really thankful for that.
It's a good problem or a good thing to not be noticing yet. Also very hard to prove when it does happen. So
right. I was kind of thinking the same thing as I was talking, who's to know, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So we have another video question here. This one is from Nate Dunning. Nate, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask a question now. Just let us know what school you're at and where you're from.
Hey, I'm Nate Dunning from the University of Mary Hardin Baylor. I'm actually originally from Tarrant County. So,
yes.
My question is, what advice would you have for conservative students looking to start a conservative-leaning campus news source?
Oh my, I would say absolutely do it. I mean, the more what's so frustrating to me is the left has so much of it, that market cornered, right? I mean, thank God for campus reform and all these others that are, probably older than I think they are. To me, they're, somewhat new, but you'd probably be horrified to hear how long they've been around. But, we're certainly doing better and better. So I'm guessing that y'all have a campus newspaper currently, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And can you say, how do you feel about that newspaper?
So my honest opinion of that newspaper is that it just doesn't cover enough. They've issued, I believe, one issue this year.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of my honest opinion on that.
Right. Well, and certainly I've seen it, and many have. Of course, most campus newspapers lean left, right? And I will tell you, when we were hiring and are hiring people to write for the Texan, I know good and well their journalism departments are very left-leaning, because everybody these days that comes out of the journalism department is left of center and not right of center. So I'm getting, my guess is the journalism departments also run those papers, and so it wouldn't surprise me if they all lean very left. You know, campuses have just gotten incredibly left of center. It's horrifying to me. So I was always so happy to have campus reform, because there's so much that goes on. You know it. I'm certain you see it, right? There's things that you see that is not, it's just the norm to people who are on, you know, who are left of center. They don't even see this as being an issue, whatever it is. Whereas you might see a story that's very much an issue, and others do too, but nobody really talks about it because nobody's saying anything about it. So if you were to start, you know, it could just be, you know, it doesn't have to be big. You know, the best things start right around the kitchen table or your dorm or apartment desk, right? It could just be something small that people start to go, hey, you know, I saw what you wrote. I'd like to write a piece. And I think you'll find that there's more of you out there than you think there are. I don't know about Baylor. Perhaps it's, you know, more conservatives than not, but for most campuses, it's not. And, or if it is, they're afraid to say that, right? So I'm always, you know, eager to get people on campus to speak up, to start whatever, you know, conservative organizations or write a paper, whatever. I think it'd be a great idea.
And one thing I would add to that as well is the Leadership Institute offers student publication workshops. So if you're wanting to start a student publication, we can offer training on that. Oftentimes we include grants with that, so you can have a little capital to get your thing off the ground. So that's another element, Nate, that I would encourage you to look into, is that element of Leadership Institute training. So I want to get to another question here. This is Lucy Anderson at Sacramento State. And as a woman involved in media, do you think conservative women are more prone to criticism than men?
Conservative women, here's the way I tend not to look at too many things as identity politics. However, I'm not criticizing you here, because there is difference between men and women, right? If there is a difference between anybody, it's a difference between men and women. But I will tell you what I see more than anything is conservative women by the legacy media or the mainstream media are not seen at all. I mean, when I was a Texas state senator in the same district as Wendy Davis, the amount of media attention was like night and day, right? Wendy Davis, who was a Democrat, is a Democrat, liberal Democrat, you know, articles all the time, you know, here, that, and the other. You know, I'm a woman in that district, elected nothing. Well, I don't want to say nothing. That's not true, but, you know, just not to the level of. Another thing, like, you know, I'm the owner of this media organization. You know, there was recently another media organization, left of center media organization, started by women. It was the talk of the town, right? But, you know, it's like, hello, you know? So more what I see is, it's kind of like, for instance, Justice, oh my God, Justice Thomas, like he's a black justice, Supreme Court, and basically ignored by the left of center media, right? And that's kind of what they do with conservative women as well. It's like, really, if you're a woman, you're supposed to be a Democrat. and we really don't pay attention to you if you're a conservative. It's bizarre. It's really, I guess what I meant by that with the Justice Thomas is that it's like Black conservatives or women conservatives. The media on the left thinks that they should be Democrats, so we're not going to give them that much attention. That's the way I see it anyway.
Nice. Very, very interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Next up, Nathan Bryant asked, what is the Texan standard when it comes to drawing the line between right of center journalism and conservative advocacy? So how do you draw that line?
Yeah. And that's, something that we have to be very careful about, and probably that's more the editor. I have an editor, obviously, and writers, and the editor makes sure that, the words that we're not using advocacy type of words when we're writing, when the writers are writing their articles. We get both sides to each story, and trust me, that's not a bad thing. I know sometimes when I say that, people are like, well, why do we want to hear from this left of center organization in this article? Trust me, you do want to read that, because what I notice too, so much of the time, when, let's say, left of center organizations are quoted in, regular media organizations, it's done through their lens. And I don't know, it's weird. It's like they put it in a way that sounds kind of okay, right? But when we're quoting them, it's just their quotes, this is what they say. And I think it's very eye-opening. So it's really very, very good to get both sides when it's not through the lens of the regular mainstream media. And so we get both sides. Our editor makes sure that, we're not advocating, we're not using words that are like, I don't know, what are some kind of words that are strong that you'll notice it once you start reading, the difference between a factually written article, but maybe from a right of center perspective, meaning the type of story or the words used, on an advocacy type of article that just comes out and uses emotion, right? So we don't use any kind of emotional words, that kind of a thing. So again, that's all really my editor, who controls all of that.
Yeah, and you touch on the framing. That's one thing we've focused on at Campus Reform, is obviously we are a conservative outlet. We're very open about our political leaning. Right. And so I think one time where you really start to see it come out is in the headline, because the headline is so much of how the framing of an article goes. That's and right. You can have the exact same story with the exact same body, and a headline can make a story seem totally different than what it is, or how it's being reported elsewhere. And so I think that's a big focus, and you touched on that a little bit, but that's a big focus, I think, to answer that question as well. Just kind of throw a little piece there is the headline and how it's being framed. So I think that's another big part of it there. So next question for you is from Jonathan McCormick from Andrews University. He said, I am a campus correspondent with Campus Reform. Thank you, Jonathan. Who is interested in possibly building my own media outlet after I finish college. Besides generic entrepreneurship lessons, what advice do you have for me if I do start my own media outlet?
Wow, that's, what I did is I got on the phone and spoke to lots of people. So obviously I would be one that I would want you to call because now I've started one, and you obviously, like any business, you kind of learn things along the way. But I made a lot of phone calls to a lot of people. Now, granted, the fact that I was a state senator kind of helped me to get in touch with different people. I hate to say that, but it's a little bit easier, right? And I had connections and contacts, and so I was able to kind of talk to different people all over the country. What's your take on this? How do you think about this business model? That kind of thing. And I will tell you one thing that you've got to be really careful about is the business model that you use. And Cabot, if you don't mind, I'll explain just a little bit really quickly how the Texan is different as well. Because if y'all notice, there's a lot of media organizations that are going under right now, right? People are shuttering their doors. These are these legacy media outlets. And so it's pretty bizarre that we're starting this media outlet. But so we had to think long and hard on the business model that we were going to use. And there's nothing wrong with these business models. It's just what we chose not to do. And basically there's kind of two ways to do that is either advertisers, can fund your business, your organization, or you get a lot, you get donors to fund it. And Cabot, just to kind of let you know, you touched on it a minute ago, we did not do the advertising based model, because what we were worried about with that is what you mentioned, the clickbait headlines, right? A lot of times, I'm not saying everybody does this, but some organizations will get away from what their readers are wanting, because the advertisers are wanting clicks, right? So to sell, to get that money from your advertisers, you've got to sell clicks. So you got to make your headlines a little bit bolder, a little bit more, it's called, of course, y'all know, clickbait. And then you open up the article, and a lot of times the article has nothing to do with the headline, right? And so we did not want to do that. We did not want an advertiser-based fueled model. And we also didn't want a donor fueled model, because again, we didn't want the donors to put too much emphasis on what they wanted, right? We wanted the readers to be who we were accountable to. So we are actually a subscription-based model. So we don't have advertisers, we don't have donors. We are privately held. My husband and I put a bunch of money into this to start it. And then we sell subscriptions to it. And so we are only accountable to our readers. Now, whether, so these are the kinds of things that you really have to think about and talk to others about who have started it. Down the road, whenever you're starting yours, I'd like you to call me and say, so how is that working out? You might decide to go to an advertising fueled model, but that's really the kinds of things that you have to think about, how you're going to be able to sustain it, and whether it's, the model that you want or not. So those are things that you don't think about when you, initially, until you really start doing it. And it's very important, obviously.
See, Jonathan, you're making connections already. You got someone to call. You got someone, you have no excuses, because you got someone to give you feedback. So next question is from another Texan. You've really brought out your fellow Texans tonight. This is Derek Green at the University of North Texas, and he is with the Young Conservatives of Texas. He's short and sweet. Has the media always been so biased? What do you think?
That's a great question too. I swear it hasn't been. I swear. Now, having said that, my gosh, I bet it was at least 25 years ago that I picked up the phone and called the 4-Star Telegram and said, I don't want to get it. Back in the day, you got your newspaper in your driveway, which is even bizarre to me even. But that's how we got it every day. And finally, my husband and I thought, why are we paying money for this newspaper when I pick it up and read it every morning, and it just makes me angry because of their viewpoint, right? It's again, their perspective of stories, and their bias and their narrative pushing. And so, God, I swear it was 25 years ago that I did that, maybe 20, maybe it was 20 years ago that I called and said, no more. So, I think it's gotten worse, and certainly it has. I mean, my God, we've seen it with Trump in office, good Lord, I think that's really, really brought it out even more. Their visceral, I don't know, hate, and it just really is apparent. But so anyway, that's a very not concrete answer. I think it has, and yet sometimes when I look back, I think maybe it hasn't. Maybe we're just all more aware of it now.
Yeah, one thing I always love to point people to when they ask about proof of bias in media. Gallup did a survey looking at all of the political media and coverage of the past 2 presidencies. And they judged it based on neutral, positive, or negative. And they found that for President Obama in 8 years of office in the legacy media, there was 84% of the stories about him were either had a positive slant or a neutral slant. For President Trump, it's at, I believe it was 16% had a positive or neutral slant. The rest had a noted negative slant.
Yes.
And so they based it on the keywords being used, the framing.
That's right.
Definitely hard to deny that there is a bias. I think the question is how long it's been there. And I think you bring some interesting perspective to that. So next question is from Tyler Tonko. He is at YCT at Commerce, Texas. And he asks, what is your ultimate vision for the Texan News? Do you have any specific goals for the organization?
Sure. Right. So obviously we want to grow larger and larger. Again, as I said, we are based in Austin, and we've got staff writers there, and then we've got some contract writers in a couple or three different areas of Texas. But Texas is a huge state, and what our vision is getting more writers, contract writers in different parts of the state, and then getting as local as we can get. I mean, we want to grow and get bigger and be able to shine light on local, county, and state and federal issues that have to do with Texas politics. So we definitely want to continue to grow. We want to get more people in more writers in different parts of the state, because, as you know, the things that worry North Texans or concerns of North Texans are very different than those that are in the Valley, or even those that are out in West Texas, right? The politics is very different for all regions of Texas. And so we want to continue growing. We want to continue to get contract writers in different parts of Texas. And then as we do that, then continue to work down to the local level as much as we can.
All right, next question, Julia Westwick, and she asks, how does being CEO of the Texan compare to being a state senator? Do you prefer life in the public or private sector?
Oh, that's a great question. I very, very much loved being a state senator because I could kill all the bad legislation that was coming down. And trust me, on both sides of the aisle, there is way too much garbage. And so, that was exciting and thrilling, being able to, catch this legislation and kill it. So I enjoyed that. Now, having said that, and now that I'm out, the frustrations that I did have when I was in office, I don't have anymore. And I can be more vocal again. I mean, here's the deal, when you're in office, you do have to work with your colleagues every day on both sides of the aisle. And so you're always respectful, because today you may be working with somebody, tomorrow you might be, fighting them on a particular piece of legislation. But believe it or not, it's particularly at state level, it's not as, Democrats versus Republicans. A lot of times it's, say, rural versus, urban, right? That are together and apart, working together or apart. So, you have to have that level of professionalism, and you kind of can't say as much as you can publicly when you're not in office, right? So I enjoy, now that I'm not in office, being able to, throw out a tweet with my real feelings. And that's fun to have that back again, because when you're in office, you tend to try to, keep it at a respectable level. And so, yeah. So there was good things to both, I guess is what I'm saying. I appreciated being there. I appreciated being able to kill bad legislation, but I also enjoy being in the private sector and be able to say, what I want when I want, without the worry of, hurting somebody's feelings, and then tomorrow they won't work on a bill with me, Yeah.
I worked on the Rubio campaign in 2016, and during the whole campaign, I knew anything I tweet can and will be used against me. Exactly. And the second the campaign ended, I was like, finally, I can say whatever I want. I can only imagine what it was like actually being the politician.
That's
and not
right.
being some random staffer.
You're spot on. That's exactly
a little bit,
correct.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Not even to the degree you do, though. So next question from about the opposite end of the country, University of Maine. Kurt asks, what are some things when you started on your mission that you wish you knew earlier?
And I guess by mission, he means the Texan particularly, I'm guessing. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
Yeah. Really, I don't, I have to tell, you've stumped me a little bit, because I don't think there's anything yet. So far, we did our homework. We did heavy homework. Like I said, I called people, my husband drew up the business plan. I was kind of doing the outreach, gathering all the information. And, we had all our ducks in a row when we decided to move forward. We had done all our homework, and that's not to say that we took a lot of time deciding, because let's see, the race was in November, and we lost that election, and by April, goodness, we were already starting in a couple of months. We were already starting to put everything together, and then by April, end of April, we launched. So really, to have all of that done and have the website done and have, you know, writers in house and have an office and everything, that's pretty phenomenal amount of time. But having said that, we definitely did all our homework, and we dotted our I's and we crossed our T's. And I can't think of anything right now that I've gone, oh, I wish we'd have known that, or I wish we'd have done that. Not yet. Now, maybe maybe this year something like that'll happen, but so far we haven't experienced that, thank God. So
I was going to say, I imagine most people not in that boat where they,
yeah,
it's probably a good thing that you're not able to think of stuff you had done.
Right.
So next question from Taylor Shirk up at Colorado State University. Taylor asked, what do you suggest students do to get involved with conservative media while still in school?
Yeah, it's great, because, you know, we need, like at the Texan, we need, interns that will come in and do research for us. You know, we are a small operation, even though it's phenomenal the amount of content that we put out, but we are a small organization. And so it would always help our writers to have, interns that'll do some research for them, because they have to be on a phone call. Here's the problem, I guess, campus reform, certainly, I mean, you've got some right of center media, but the problem is there's not going to be that many conservative media organizations to do things with, or to get even if it's not intern, if it is some sort of a part-time job, and we would certainly have, some part-time positions available, say, for social media type stuff, for instance. We don't right now, but that's something that we could hire somebody part-time for. That's the kind of thing that I would suggest to you, either being an intern or doing like their social media. It's always the young kids who know all the social media stuff, and can put things together very quickly and do that better than somebody that might be a bit older. And so I would suggest looking for those conservative organizations and offering to be an intern, or looking for a part-time position with them, because that will be invaluable, and that will help you to then get a full-time job, obviously, afterward. I think the big problem is finding that media that you might be comfortable, doing that with.
Yep, that's the exact advice I have for people too. As editor-in-chief of a publication, when people ask me that, I say, you got to start writing as much as possible. Even if it's a smaller publication, getting yourself published, because that's so helpful. As you know, when you're looking people up, you want to see their body of work. You want to see what their, what their copy is like, what their writing is like, what their opinions are, how well they cover things. So I'd say to everyone, start writing as much as you can, whether it's campus reform, whether it's going to the Texan, whatever it is. Just get yourself out there, get published. Even if it's not super polished, just getting yourself published is super helpful. So on that note, actually, is a similar question from Nathan Bryant. You're a CEO. I mean, you have a lot of resumes come across your desk. He asks, what do you look for in staff and or contract writers? And so what kind of things stick out to you when it comes to looking for writers? And then the follow-up to that is, how can we get in touch with you?
Yes, awesome. Excuse me. So I'm glad you asked, because we actually do want and need more writers. Now, exactly when that all happens is, is still, we're working on, but we definitely, if anybody out there is interested, I would suggest y'all getting in touch with us, and I'll give you that in a minute. So here's the difference in what we notice. Again, like I mentioned earlier, when we look at people out of journalism schools, we do deep dives, right? We look at their social media, we look at their body of work, as you just said, Cabot, and, we look at as much, try to get a feel for where they are politically, because we are a right of center media organization. As I mentioned, we say that. We're not like these other media entities that claim they're unbiased, and then everything they write is pushing a left of center narrative, right? We're just the opposite. we say, no, we're all right of center. We understand right of center politics. We understand right of center policy. We understand all that. And yet the content that we put out, straight news reporting, right? So for us, what we look for is really a depth of knowledge in right of center politics and policy first, because it just doesn't, you don't find people out of journalism schools, or we haven't yet. I'm sure they're out there, but we haven't yet found anybody out of a journalism school that holds our same values and principles, right? So we want first somebody that is right of center, that has a good grasp of policy and issues. Then we look for excellent writing skills, right? So we may have somebody coming out of school that, maybe was political science major. Maybe they weren't even, maybe they're just, they had another major and they were very involved in Leadership Institute or, Young Conservatives or, and they maybe did work on campaigns, right? So we want that knowledge first. And then we asked, to look at some of their writing and see that, if they can write. And of course we have an editor, but nonetheless, people need to have be able to write. And that's what we look for in writers. So let me give you an email address. If everybody's kind of got, frantically getting their phone to type this in, it is M as in Mary, Taylor, Taylor, at thetexan.news. M. Taylor at thetexan.news. If you have a resume that you'd like to send because you're interested in writing for the Texan, please send it to Mackenzie Taylor is her name, Mackenzie Taylor, but it's M. Taylor at thetexan.news, because we are taking applications and resumes and we're looking at them. So if anybody out there is interested and thinking about moving to Texas, or you live in Texas, we'd be very interested in looking at your resume.
Awesome. And we just put that in the chat feature for anyone that didn't get a chance to write that down. So that email is in the chat feature right now. We've got one final question, and then afterwards, I'll let you offer kind of a final send off to everyone. This one's from Jeff Williams at UT San Antonio with the Turning Point USA chapter there. And Jeff asks, are any mainstream media outlets trustworthy? So who do you read besides the Texan? Who do you read? Are any of them trustworthy that you find?
Here's the deal. You will occasionally find a decent article in all the media outlets, frankly, right? You can read, and here, I think, like, for instance, with the Fort Worth Star Telegram, I, have one writer that Anna Tinsley, I think, is a very, very fair and good writer. And so I like her articles. I think they're fair. So it's really, it's definitely the outlets too. I was going to say, maybe it's just the writers, but it's not, it's the outlets. But there are particular writers within outlets that tend to be more fair than others. So, and like I said, there's always going to be an article here and there. It's like, okay, that wasn't bad, but that's the problem, because then they kind of, they pull you in, and then all of a sudden you realize, wait, the last 5 articles I've read are talking about, identity politics, talking about, the border only from the issue of, kids in cages. It all it dawns on you that they're writing everything from the perspective of the left and not necessarily how we see issues. So I really don't. I'm telling you, I know that's terrible, but that's exactly why we decided to start the Texan, is because there's not any out there that I find is trustworthy and doesn't push a dadgum narrative. That's what I'm tired of, is the narrative pushing by all of these, so.
I think we all can relate with that, and we are very grateful that you're doing what you're doing. And thank you so much, Konni, for taking the time to do this, to offer your insight. I'm going to have a few short words after, but I would love for you to get kind of a chance to offer any closing remarks you have to everyone, and then I'll pop in with a few final announcements.
Okay, terrific. Well, I very much appreciate this opportunity to talk to everybody. I'm telling you, the young people is what keeps me going. I know y'all hear it all the time. Y'all are the future, but you truly are. And particularly people who are young and conservative, I don't know. I hold y'all above anybody else, because it's very hard to be young and conservative, right? Most young people, and probably me too at that time, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't, I never was a liberal, but it's easy to be liberal when you're in college, right? It's just, you go with the flow. And so for all of you to be strong conservatives and to see the big picture, which is really what it is to be a conservative, right? Is to see the big picture. And I just so much appreciate all of you so much. Stick with your principles, continue to work for conservatives, for the conservative movement, because my God, we need you so badly. I'm so worried about the country, big picture wise, right? I mean, look who we just, what's his face, the socialist, that just Bernie, right? I mean, my God, the fact that we had, that he almost is the Democratic nominee is frightening to me. So we need y'all so badly. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. We need you to keep doing what you're doing, and all of us together, I think we're going to see a better day, but we've all got to work toward it. And so thank you for what y'all are doing, and thank you for allowing me to come on and talk about the Texan.
Amen. Thank you so much, Connie. And my final encouragement to everyone, there are more of you out there than you know. And if you guys speak up on your campuses, I promise you're not alone. It's much easier to follow things once it gets started. Sometimes it just takes one person to get things going. So I encourage all you guys to get things started. There will be people that will stand up and follow you and say, I didn't know other people on campus were willing to speak out. Thank you for doing that. So I want to encourage you all to do that. So a couple final announcements before we hop off here. The winner of our raffle is Julia Westwick at Trinity College. So Julia, go ahead and we'll be contacting you after this. So thank you so much for being here. You win the $25 Uber Eats gift card. I'm assuming all of you guys are doing a drum roll there for me to announce that. If you guys enjoyed this, the next week we'll have Ambassador Nikki Haley joining us. That's April 22nd, 8 p.m. We'll be sending out some emails on that, so you guys can be sure to attend. And finally, if there's anything we can help on, we want to be sure to take your feedback. Please give us constructive feedback. We are more than happy to implement changes. We want to know what's best, how we can best serve you guys. So in the chat function, there is a feature there to fill out a survey. Go for it, fill out that survey, let us know what we can do to help. But at that, I hope all of you guys have a great evening and you are social distancing and quarantining well, enjoying yourselves, enjoying some downtime. Stay safe, stay healthy. Konni Burton, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for joining us here, all of you at the Leadership Institute online webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for watching this video. To watch our latest video, click here. And to make sure you don't miss any future videos, be sure to subscribe.